Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to inform you all that this meeting is live streamed on YouTube, and just filling in for Chair Paul McMahon, who'll be here a bit later. So if everyone would like to stand and join me with our opening karakia, please. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā, kina kina ke uta, kia mā, taratara ki tai, e he aki aku te atakura, he tio, he ruka, he hau, tihe, au. Thank you, everyone. Just like to put in some apologies for some of our members. Our city councillors are running a little late today, but I see it's made it. And our chair, Paul McMahon, is also delayed, but will be here later, as will Alex Hewison. Now, I would like to invite our Hay Street residents to join us at the table for this presentation. If you'd like to come up and just take one of the free seats, that way you'll be able to. Mr. Area, if you'd like to come up and have a seat with us too, this means that you'll be able to join with us in our discussion. So staff for Hay Street. Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
A presentation for us.
Very brief. So I'm Peter Borden. I'm the project manager for the Improving Bromley Roads project. And I have with me staff today representing our transport planning and network, traffic operations, the area engineer, and representative of the traffic engineer safety team. And we also have our program delivery manager, Sharon O'Neill, with us today as well. So just very briefly, we're focusing on Hay Street here, and how Hay Street features in the Bromley Transport Action Plan and how we got to where we are today in the Bromley Transport Action Plan. And just a very brief run through the community concerns and highlighted throughout all of the engagement we've been doing. So too many words on there, but the Transport Action Plan stemmed out of a long period of engagement with the community stretching back past 2019. That eventually culminated in funding being allocated to fund the works to generate Bromley Transport Action Plan and collect data and investigate solutions for those concerns that the community had raised. And there were also a large number of meetings with the community, drop-in sessions. There's been at least a couple of periods of formal consultation when schemes have come through. And there was a Bromley working group was worked with as well. So out of that, the action plan was developed. Traffic data was collected, community issues investigated. The themes are consistent. They're well established. They haven't changed. Predominantly speeding vehicles and the high volumes of heavy vehicles on the local residential roads, and the safety of pedestrians and the school community and the school community. That then led to the priority to establish some quick wins. So the money that we had left over in the budget that we could deliver work with was deemed quick wins, and those interventions were focusing directly on addressing community concerns and the highest priority concerns around there. And they were predominantly centred around the school and the roads around the school. In there, those were identified and prioritised in an info session workshop with the community board, and then those have been taken forward and a scheme design has been developed for those in there, and that is currently in detailed design and construction. Originally, Hay Street was part of that, proposed as part of that scheme, but the carriageway condition meant that that work had to wait until that could be addressed as well before the traffic calming could be done. So we're currently in the detailed design and construction stage for the phase 1A work. We're hoping to have that in construction later this year. And then after that, we'll be monitoring the traffic behaviour and see if we've achieved the changes that we're after. So that to address those issues. And then we'll update the community board, and then we'll go back around and update the action plan and look at where are the next priorities and what funding would be required for those priorities. So now we've got all that underway. It's just a rinse and repeat, depending on funding, basically.
Okay.
Just very briefly, that's the location of where the issues identified are in summary down Hay Street. So as you see, predominantly Linwood intersections, a number of submissions in there and concerns raised about the speeds of vehicles turning in and out of Hay Street on that intersection. The heavy vehicles on Hay Street, high vehicle speeds, and there seems to be a link to buses coming through from the depot. We don't have detailed information on that at the moment. And then there's just an excerpt there on the right-hand side of the from the Bromley Transport Action Plan that's up on the council webpage at the moment. Those are the items relating to Hay Street that are summarised in the plan. In there, they're split into two there. The northeastern part of Hay Street from McGregor's intersection north up to Ruru, because the pavement condition there is in better condition, and traffic calming interventions, when money is available for them, could be put in without substantial works to remediate pavement. Well, sorry, when I say pavement, I mean the carriageway, not the footpath. And then Hay Street, the southern portion of it, from Butterfield and south, then there, the concerns that were raised there by residents through the consultations and interaction with the community groups was, once again, the intersection coming around Linwood Ave, to slow the vehicles down and make it safer for people to cross. Intersection upgrade, that was up around McGregor's Butterfield intersection. It was originally proposed by Transport Choices. Traffic calming to lower speeds and deter heavy vehicles on the straight piece of Hay Street. And then the intersection at McGregor's is also. That's all I have.
Okay, so can you tell me if this work at this point, where are we at with that? Is it put into the scheme of things to be done? Is it on a list to be done?
So if you go back to the first slide, jump back up, please, Cindy. So we're down. So that point, quick ones. We went through those with the community board back in November, and a decision made was in December to take the first phase of work through. So that scheme was approved. And we're now, in the next bullet point down, we're now in detailed design. And
so this includes Hay Street?
No.
No, that's no. I'm asking about Hay Street. So is that just not, it's in limbo at the moment? It
relies on having funding available to be able to remediate the pavement. And
okay, do you understand that, Chris?
Yeah. So the northern part of
funding allocated at this point. Yeah.
So not sufficient. Yeah. The northern part of Hay Street, should the board choose to do so, then interventions could be put on there. But.
Okay. County. Yeah. Oh, right, you are. Sorry, Mr. Councillor Hanson's a bit of pain at the moment. Sorry. You might want to pull his thing forward for him, Greg.
Yeah. My understanding was that originally Hay Street was needed earthquake repairs, and so it was going to be on a budget to get the earthquake repairs because of the condition. And then we got further information that said actually, I think it's 130th on the priority list, therefore it's not being funded. And then more recently, we've been told actually no, it is a priority, and there will be some funding for the renewal. So I'm just trying to understand like where to get like to that funding question. Like, there's a renewal program budget, I think 205, CPMS 205, which is the program budget for renewals. Is there any money within that program level budget that's been allocated to Hay Street or not?
Okay, come to the table.
So yeah, if you could bring Sharon up, the program manager, better place to answer that.
In terms of the
Yep, that's fine.
In terms of the street renewal program, we are getting new data regularly through at the moment with changes in technology, how the testing, etc. So Hay Street is looking like it's going to be one of the next projects to hit that prioritisation list. We haven't got to finalising that yet, but it is looking high on that list. So probably middle of the year, we'll hopefully have that a place to say yes or no.
Can we, as a board or a community, get the information ahead of the draft annual plan being finalised?
The annual plan?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that would be the key deadline for us, is that if we need to do a budget amendment, I mean, we don't know that council will support it. In the past, when I've tried to get Waitai Street, they've rejected it. But we could certainly have a go again, but it would be just good to know before council signs off on the final annual plan.
Yes,
where it
definitely.
sits in that list.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. And I understand that that's only for half of it, because the northern part is in much better condition.
That's right. So any traffic calming or works that were done to slow vehicles, etc., in the McGregor's to Linwood Ave section would be done in conjunction with the street renewal. If it's funded, the section north of McGregor's would need funding to do that separately as just traffic calming improvements.
Okay. And is there any, and apologies for being late, you may have covered this in the start of the presentation, but has there been any consideration of cycling or improved pedestrian facilities through this area?
So pedestrian facilities and safety of pedestrians has been raised by the community, and that's frequently raised, and that's why we focused on the area around the school and spreading the treated or protected area of the streets of the network, spreading out from the community centre and the school as a hub. Makes more sense than having sort of isolated treatments scattered around the neighbourhood. Cycling hasn't been raised as a common thing, as I recall. Might have been some isolated mentions of it, but it certainly didn't stand out. I couldn't find any mentions of it in summaries of engagement and consultation that have been provided to the board. It was covered in Transport Choices project in the A. McGregor's Butterfield intersection. There was consideration for how cycling would get through there. And I think in the draft scheme that council saw that they approved, there were provisions for cycling through that intersection. And some thought had been given how that might link up to Hay Street and Linwood intersection at a very high level in early stage.
So I think the concern is just to understand, like, if you look at whether major cycleway route is preferred. I know we can't talk about it publicly, but I am interested to understand how the connection comes from Brighton through down towards the city, but particularly going to that Eastgate area as a destination. And at the moment, the preferred route for the MCR does not cater for people that would be coming from this side of Eastgate going towards Eastgate, Water Bromley. So just kind of interested, if it's possible to understand at some time, that maybe in the future process around the thoughts on that.
Just picking up on Danny's question, around because I guess it's more around the cycle connections rather than a really formalised route. Do you know if you might not have the information, but do you know if there is a cycle connection that is somewhere in the Bolton plan for this part of Linwood?
Sorry, off the top of my head, not that I'm aware of, but I wouldn't put my hand on heart.
Is there information we can, or we go through another process?
We could forward through the cycle connection projects through to tend to distribute,
So I know in the last long-term plan, some of them weren't very well, the descriptors weren't very clear. So like the Eastern Orbital Link, wasn't really sure what it was, but it turns out it's along Bridge Street, which is quite helpful. But some of those connections are good opportunities to then, even though we don't have an MCR along there, get people from A to B without maybe spending quite as much.
Yep, we could send that through with the scope of what's funded at the moment.
So just one final question. With that specific thing, if we want to look at that as down the track as part of the project, just some sort of minor safety improvements in that front. Is it the fact that this has got heavy vehicles going on it, a prioritisation factor for those types of safety improvements? Or is it not, they're not a link there? Like areas where you're more likely to get trucks and buses moving along, generally a higher priority for those sort of safety upgrades?
It is inside the Bromley Transport Action Plan.
Yeah, okay.
In there, outside that, I would have thought it would have been, but
Yeah.
you know, I don't have that knowledge.
Just, what I understand now is we have one section of Hay Street that needs traffic calming, but not a lot else. And then another section of Hay Street that needs more of a rebuild. Is that the correct way to look at it?
Yeah.
Okay, so is it possible then to split those two sections into two separate works so that we could use the bit that just needs the traffic calming as a quick win? And then go, you know, when we have that more funding that we need to go back and do the other end. I mean, does it have to be done in one project?
No, it doesn't. It can definitely be done in two parts. But my understanding, and Peter can confirm, is that the budget that's available is primarily being utilised on the Quins that have been identified already.
Yep.
So it would still need more funding to do
Okay.
that.
Yeah. I'm just saying that if we can traffic calm.
Yeah.
One end of that road, because what they're doing, they're using the whole road. But if we traffic calm one end of that road, the one that can be done quickly without building the rest of it, the possibility is that people will not use that road. Right? If we've got a whole load of speed bumps at one end of the road that the buses are using to go from Linwood Ave to the top, then they may not decide to use. We've repeatedly asked the buses not to go down there. If we've got traffic coming at one end, it may stop some of those trucks and buses going down the whole length of that road. Is that a possibility? Any thoughts on that?
It's that sort of route approach is something, because we don't have a lot of, we're trying to spread the money as widely as possible and be as effective as possible. But so that sort of route approach has been considered in the priorities that we had discussed with the board. I would note that Hay Street, that section of Hay Street, is a bus route. And it's also a
route. You know, I mean, one bus going down there and having to go over a few speed humps is not an issue to me at all. It is the buses at night, like lots of them going down there late at night, high speeds and shaking people's houses. So it's,
And the bus is getting heavier because they're electric now as well.
so if we can stop those night buses going down there because it's inconvenient, then that is a win for the people in Hay Street. Neil or Chris, do you have any questions or comments you'd like to make on what you've heard so far?
No, but I mean, the speed now is reduced to 30. Yes. It is reduced to 30, so I would hate to see Hay Street become another Smith Street where they've got 14 speed bumps.
So are the drivers doing 30?
Yes.
Because I've seen
from 10 to 6 in the morning. I follow them regularly and they're all sitting on 30.
So I've seen numerous things on Facebook about people saying they're going to continue to do 80 down there if they wish. So that's not happening now. Is it slowed down a bit?
As a resident in the front part, the southern end of Hay Street, I would say the buses aren't much of a problem. They travel fairly slowly and they're all off duty.
Okay.
And they may have had instructions, to mind themselves.
That's contrary to what we've heard before, but that's good if there's been improvement.
The damage to Hay Street was done by the installation of the high tension ring main well before the earthquake, and it's been like that ever since.
Right.
I don't think the earthquake, I don't know how the engineer, but might have done some damage more, but it's been bad for a long time, the surface.
Yeah.
Which causes the noise.
Right. Okay. Is that, I don't quite understand that ring surface thing, but is it the surface of the road that causes the noise?
I can only, yes, I acknowledge that there are services down there. It would appear from looking at Street View, you can see that there has been subsurface work, whatever that is done down there. But the the carriageway condition assessment that Sharon had referred to has picked that up, and that's why we've made that recommendation that really traffic calming works need to be supported by a street renewal down there, because those results show the pavement condition
Right.
being worse than up in the northern part of the street.
So where I understand it, we know that it needs to be done, but there's no funding. So we need to get some funding before we can move further at all.
Not quite true that there's no funding. There's
no funding allocated to it. No,
Yeah, there's funding at a program level that there needs to be consideration around allocating it to.
That program, yeah,
Possible funding, for half of it, at least for the bad half.
Okay,
It's
making it a
priority, isn't it?
But we won't know until just ahead of the budget.
that program does have to be prioritised based on condition of carriageway, curb and channel and footpaths in order that we get NZTA subsidy against that program. So, but as I say, Hay Street is looking like it's gonna make that cut.
okay. All right. Yeah, carry on, ask your question.
Can I just ask a question? The high tension ring main, is that the power that goes?
It goes from Sandyland substation to the back of Lancaster Park. It forms the power ring around Christchurch.
Right,
And also before that, they put in a giant rising sewer main. So the road's been well and truly done.
okay,
And that's presumably what's good. Mind you, it's just the surface. I don't really need to go before I can do curbs and channels.
So could I just clarify there? There's different things that need to be considered when you're looking at what a road needs. If it's just lacking waterproofness, then it'll just get a coat of chip seal to re-waterproof it. That's fine. If the running course, the course that the cars run on and the vehicles run on is damaged, but the foundations are still fine, then it's just that top layer of 50 mil that might need to be replaced. However, the condition assessments that these are Christchurch wide on targeted streets that Sharon's referred to, the way the program's prioritised on, that looks right down to the foundations. And so as you've observed in there, the surface is uneven, and that's because the foundations have failed, and that's what those results are showing us. So in a street where the footpaths and channel were still in good condition, you can just replace just the carriageway, dig outs down to fix the foundation, and maybe remove the whole lot in there. However, on that lower part of Hay Street, it's also got deep dish that's aged, and that needs to have the waterproofness addressed. It's seen as a level of service and a trip hazard and things like that. And that's generally done at the same time as footpaths are as well. So that turns it from the seals rough to boundary road renewal. And then,
right. That we've got more.
I guess it's probably just a kind of general question about when we do the road renewal. If we do the road renewal, that we will look at tree planting, landscaping, like those things start to come into account, right?
They do.
Yeah. So through that process, there will be an opportunity to talk to the community about what features they might want, and then we'll just work that through out in the process. Consider.
Yeah, it's certainly an opportunity to provide a much improved road environment.
So if we were to secure funding, then it would go to detailed design, then we would go out to consultation. The people in Hay Street.
Yes, we go into what we call scheme design, development of the scheme, out for consultation. Detailed design.
And we'd also be looking at some engagement to inform what sort of options the scheme would look at.
Good, yeah, because I know I was part of the Bromley group, and we did look a lot around the schools, but Hay Street was, a lot of people. There wasn't a lot of people there from Hay Street, from what I recall. So it would be interesting to get a bigger perspective from the actual residents as opposed to, that small group. Okay. Do we have any other questions at this point?
I mean, just from the residents, like, is there anything else that you think we could do to enhance the area that you would like to see?
What would you like done to your streets? Or, what is your preference?
We don't want to just put in a whole one.
No.
We don't want to just put in a whole bunch of speed humps and get people going, oh, hey, you know, like your reaction to Smith Street, but what are the things we could do to make the area nicer for you? If we were looking into it, it's like the road renewal.
Probably just fix up the paths and that are a bit rugged. A lot of people won't go out walking because they're scared they're going to fall over. Tree roots and all that kind of thing. Things like that, yeah.
Well, at mine, the walk footpaths, because it's the reverse old fashioned thing with the building, so.
Yeah,
Have been resealed in those 15 years.
right,
They're not bad down there, but it's just the surface of the road.
yeah. So it's,
It
yeah,
causes
different issues
noise
in different spaces.
So I
Yeah.
don't know how you fix it without going the whole hog. That's what we really need. And maybe where you are, the footpaths.
What, sorry?
The deep dish footpath.
Yeah, you say, yeah.
Right. Okay, but you're not a fan of the speed bumps?
I just don't think it's needed. You know, like I've lived in my place for 21 years.
Yeah.
And there's been one accident that I know of, and that was a medical event. And I just think, why is our road, our street, gone to 30?
Right.
By order.
No, they haven't. You come over Redwood and all that.
Oh, no, around Hay Street.
Yeah, I know. but why
Essentially,
on the
a lot
east
of the street calming issues came out of the working group, which was residents, right, who wanted traffic slowed down around that area, mostly for school children, around Bromley School and so on, and to stop the circuit of trucks going through residential streets, right? Smith Street uses a lot of speed bumps in Smith Street, but that is actually what the people in Smith Street asked for, because they did have a lot of races and things, but you're saying that's not happening so much now, because that was why we were looking at.
Yeah, but we still get boy races and that shooting up and down Hay Street. You know.
We can fix that.
Well, that's not likely to happen, unfortunately. Yeah, Celeste.
I'm sure it's the report, we have the report somewhere, but do we have like some data in terms of the speeds, average speeds?
Yes, we do. That had been presented to the board. In fact, there is a map on the council website and the Bromley Transport Action Plan webpage. There is, sorry.
You don't recall off the top of your head?
The streets with the high, they measure them at 85 percentile. So 15% of the traffic is travelling over that speed. So Hay Street, Keely's, Bromley, and there are over 50 to 55 kilometres an hour. Yeah.
More speeding on average.
Yes. So if you want to know where the high speeds are,
Okay.
Keely's, Bromley, Hay, McGregor's.
Yeah.
And then it's a network.
Yeah, it's
And that is where we've been asked to slow it
a
down.
wide street, right, which is quite appealing for people who want to pass.
Just something to that. Have you done testing since the 30K signals have come in to see what difference?
No, we're about to set that up for Keely's, Bromley in there before we undertake the construction works. And that will have some before and after.
Might be useful to get it for Hay as well.
Yeah. Okay, so is there any other questions from anyone? Okay, I think I think we're done. Right, so the next step for us will be to get some funding to go to the scheme design or get it lifted up on the priority, in which case we'll be informed and we'll get back to you and bring out the ideas that Eclipse wants. Yeah. Oh, you're gonna yeah.
Just wondered, we thought about making submissions part of the annual plan. Has that been discussed?
We've got what the board submission is completed, and yes.
And residents as well, since there's still a bit of time on that, might be got hard copies to hand out, might be an opportunity.
Like,
Yeah.
if they want Hay Street done, yeah.
The annual plan closes tomorrow night, I think it's 9, but you can just put a little bit of info about what you'd like to see on that street, and it just means that you get visibility of that through the annual plan process. Think about those local perspectives.
Thank you.
Yanni?
Thanks. I just want to thank the 2 residents that have come in today. Just obviously there's many more residents in Hay Street. Have you got any thoughts around if we wanted to do more engagement with the residents, the best way, time, place to do that would be?
Yeah, well, I spoke to a couple, and they just said coming out to here was just a bit hard for them. They have to rely on buses and things like that to come out. They prefer it a bit closer to home.
Waitai Coastal Community Centre would be a better place.
So we've got a bit of time before we get into any sort of detailed things, as I understand it. So maybe we could think about having another, you know, a bit like this, but with at Bromley.
Yeah.
I've got a bit more information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I might point out, we got quite a lot of information about the previous plan in
Okay.
our letterboxes.
When was that?
Well, I don't know. when
Before
it was.
Christmas, wasn't it?
Well, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's 2 years ago, I think.
Oh.
The previous plan that was cancelled due to lack of funds.
Okay.
I only got the
The surf
pamphlet on
programme.
Tuesday.
Surf program.
Transport choices probably, was it?
Right.
I only got my pamphlet on.
Oh, no, this is a
Tuesday.
different pamphlet. Yeah.
I'm talking about the previous one,
Oh,
where
yeah.
they were going to attack Orwins Road and
There was quite a lot of work that was planned with some money that was going to be given to the council from central government that was pulled. So we didn't get that money. So that's that's what that would
But what you're
have been.
saying is you got that information.
we had
Yeah.
quite a lot of information
Yeah.
given to us. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I did have a call from a gentleman in Hay Street who did ask me to make Hay Street like Smith Street. So there's a lot of differing opinions and even within amongst their own residents. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So anything else? All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for coming and we'll work on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll just begin the meeting for
Just for one moment, actually, was that live? Thank you for that. Passenger zone.
Good to go, welcome. We're now going to have a presentation on the development of the Ozone Hotel site in Marine Parade. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Paul Lowe, Manager of Resource Consents. I'll do the
Microphone on.
with you now.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Paul Lowe, Manager of Resource Consents. I'll do the front half of the presentation. So I obviously manage the Resource Consents unit and oversee the consultant planner who is processing the application for the ozone site. So if we can just head to the next slide. Yeah, so council have received an application for 50 units on the site. It comprises of one 3-storey building facing out onto Marine Parade. There's 21 units in there, predominantly 1-bedroom units, and they will be used for travellers accommodation. There's a further 3 2-storey buildings generally located within the centre of the site, with 26 car parks at the rear of the site with a one-way access into the car park area and out. Broadly, the resource consent, the resource consent application is for a number of matters, and I've listed them there. Generally, the bulk height and location of the buildings is permitted. So you can generally expect the sort of intensity of development on that site as a permitted activity. But there's a number of detailed things that we have to work through, including the design quality of the building. Some of the outdoor living spaces will be a bit smaller than permitted. Often with the car parking, there's manoeuvring issues and it's a one-way access, so we need to assess all of those things. But probably the thing to note for this application is that there's no car park requirements in the district plan for a minimum number of spaces. This development does have 26 car park spaces, so they're providing more than you would expect as a permitted development. And that's probably something you've seen a lot of in New Brighton, with one of the developers in particular, having their standard mode of development without car park spaces. So it's inevitable that some of those spaces will be taken up in the street and surrounding public car park areas. So we can just head across to the next slide. There's the site, and you can see the one-way access from Lever Street. There's an access leg, and the other 2 frontages of the site. If we go to the next slide, this is just the zoning. So largely, the site is zoned medium density, but the front of the site is zoned commercial local. So that's what enables the travellers accommodation to be sited, at the frontage of the site overlooking Marine Parade in a manner that's permitted. Next slide, please. This is just the layout, and I guess this is what medium density development looks like in a site plan. Predominantly, single bed units with, I think, half a dozen 2-bedroom units. And the next slide shows the elevation that will, the perspective that will face Marine Parade. But on the left is just is the elevation from the rear and at the side. So I don't have too much more to add to the resource consent, and I did wonder if there's questions about it.
Joe and then Celeste.
Yeah, thank you. You probably would heard that there's been a wee bit concerned about the commercial aspect to this development. And is there anything that will actually stop them from being sold as homes eventually?
The main building we can see there that's 3 stories is proposed as travellers accommodation. I would assume that they are going to be subdivided, into individual units at some stage and on sold. They do not necessarily have to be used for travellers accommodation. It is possible if you're not using for travellers accommodation, you can live in them. But my understanding of the model is that the building here is that the units would be on sold at a later date. But I don't yet, we haven't yet received a subdivision consent application, to title the individual units.
Okay, so if they were sold as a residential home for somebody, do we have to rezone
No,
property?
no. The district plan allows the travellers units to be used as units, residential units, if they're not being used for that commercial activity. Keeping in mind that the units behind this block facing Marine Parade, they're all residential units.
Yeah, there's a few around the corner.
Oh, yeah,
Behind
actually,
the
sorry, there
Global Road,
is, sorry. Yeah, there are 2 more units
Commercial
of ground units that would be travellers accommodation, but yeah, mostly the rest of them are residential units.
So just with the commercial aspect to it at the moment, is there any stipulation from the council that they need to be managed properly?
I don't know. There's not a rule in the plan that says you need, on-site management. Does that answer your question?
In a way, but it's just like anyone can buy them and just rent them out as an Airbnb if they wanted to. But how do we actually ensure that that is happening?
I guess they would only be used for, Airbnb or residential. Technically, they could potentially change the units to an alternative activity. And, need to look through the fine grained detail of the district plan. But, in a broad sense, there wouldn't be any planning restriction to change, the nature of those units, say in a ground level to a shop or it's just that the building's probably not fit for purpose, for that activity.
Sorry, Susie, there'll be no restrictions on that, just something for purpose to do that.
Yeah, there'd be Building Act issues that you'd have to go through. Perhaps a home occupation type activity, that sort of scale might work, but the unit wouldn't be big enough for someone to live in and have a home occupation, I'd imagine. So
okay, thank you.
Celeste? Yeah, yeah.
So with the kind of Airbnb recommendation, is there any, so if you rent those out, is there kind of any rules around the maximum number of years, or can you just give them?
Not for the front, for any unit that's within the commercial zone, you can use that for travellers accommodation, be it Airbnb, a hotel, and there's no restriction on the number of nights or each year that you can stay in there, and there's no time limit. Once established, this use can be in perpetuity. For the residential units at the back, there are restrictions on Airbnb or travellers accommodation. And I just don't recall what they are off the top of my head, but 60 nights a year, and anything more needs a resource consent.
With the commercial part for the Airbnb traveller accommodation, are there any other requirements to mitigate the impact on neighbours and noise and traffic and stuff, or is that because it's commercially zoned? There's no real restrictions placed on them?
There are noise limits in the district plan, but it would be unusual for people, just using the units normally, be it a house or residential activity, to breach any standards. In terms of landscaping and things, just for the general amenity of the site, they do need to maintain that. But within the commercial zone, there's not really a lot of restrictions on controlling people's behaviour and things like that.
And in the residential part of the building, I'm not sure what the total, what the plan is across the whole unit for how many travellers accommodation are proposed across the whole site, do you know?
Yeah, so there's the main building has 21 units.
Okay.
And then there's about, I think there's another 2, there might be another 2 units elsewhere within the site at ground level. And I don't quite recall whether they're on the residential zone or the commercial, the other 2, but the vast majority of them in the commercial zone.
So just so I understand, the majority of the development, whether it's commercial, residential designed area, is traveller?
No, only the
23 of how many in total? 50, okay. And with the residential part, as they go through that process, there'll be a consideration of, because if someone's staying in the Airbnb accommodation in the residential part, there are more stricter rules around how that's managed.
Yeah.
Although the enforcement part of that, I think, is quite tricky, right?
There's 2 units at ground level and one of the other units, and I'm just not quite sure where they sit in terms of the zone, because it was only 2. I didn't look into that into too much detail before I came. I guess the other units technically could be used for Airbnb, within that limit of around 60 days a year.
And final question, how do we, if say all the apartments in the residential part of the section were Airbnb type rentals for over 60 days, how would we know that? What checks are done to monitor that? There
is a requirement to notify, the council when you're using units for visitors accommodation in the district plan.
So it's sort of a self-policing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, we do have monitoring officers, and they may be able to speak to that.
Yeah. So do we do proactive checks with accommodation? Not saying that it's bad, but it's more that if we've got rules in the district plan to mitigate the impacts of this and activity, but then we don't do any proactive checking, how do we then know?
I think there is some, and that might be better for the monitoring staff to deal with. But it is a challenge to track down every, it would be impossible, I think, to track down every Airbnb operator in Christchurch.
Might be just easier to focus on the developers that prioritise those kinds of units.
It's pretty easy to find out.
I think most of the
That's how they do it.
Thank you.
Just a question, the car parks, are they allocated to the units or are they first come first served? They're allocated. Okay, so we've got Alex, then Yanni, then Greg, then Joe.
Well, big list. You mentioned that the district plan allows travellers units to be used as homes and not being used for that purpose. How long has that been in the district plan? Is that kind of a tale as old as time, or is that something that's come in over the last few decades? Or
I guess the travellers accommodation rules would have come in over the last few years, but they wouldn't really have impacted the main commercial part of the site. I think the proposal just acknowledges that they, while they're intended for travellers accommodation, if they're not being used at a residential, that's permitted. Yeah, the zone's been renamed, but the rules are very similar, and I would imagine those rules have been in place since around 2016, 2018. It could have even been in the plan prior to that.
Okay, Yanni?
Thank you. Are you able just to flip back to the consent things that you had by your, and then can you just flick through to the map of the not this one but this one? Did you have?
There's a site plan on the next slide.
Plan, yeah. Cool. Okay, cool. So And not knowing the specifics of this one, but just, with my, familiarity with what's happened down Rutherford Street. We're having a problem with, the egress, into and out of these types of developments. So there's not enough queuing space, there's not enough turning space, and vehicles going in and out can't see safely to the traffic that's coming past. Are you able to give us a sense of how you assess the safety of the egress, the access points, and also the on-site maneuverability of vehicles?
Yeah, look, I haven't gone through the fine grained detail of non-compliances with the car parking, but I understand that there's non-compliance associated with two key rules. One is the width of access. And I understand that some of the car park spaces, you have to manoeuvre, more than once, to get out of the site. Not quite clear, sorry, I don't recall if there's a queuing space breach, but this particular application, they have acknowledged the limitations on the access by making it one way. So it's quite narrow up in the northern end of the site, whereas when you get down further, towards the main bulk of the site, you can see that there is additional width, and a lot of that is driven by the manoeuvring. So the likes of manoeuvring, we want to see how many spaces, how many turns you have to make before you would exit the car park. It would be detailed that the planner went through, but I'm not familiar with all the developments along Rutherford Street, but I see this as quite a different context to a lot of multi-units because of the way the car park's laid out. You're not getting into tight spaces with garages. There's no difficulty in manoeuvring out of there on the face of it in a forwards direction because you've got really good manoeuvring area.
But when you're doing, say the exit onto Boat Hill Road, how much visibility do people have seeing the oncoming traffic? Is that that's one of the concerns that has been expressed to us about Rutherford Street, is people can't actually see the cars coming because they have to pull out, so far into the road before they can even have visibility because the buildings they're not Rutherford Street. But that's probably more from existing parking blocking the view, but other parts, people have raised concern that the development also, because it's so close up against the.
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends on how, to a degree, how the vehicle crossing is formed. So I guess when you're exiting the site onto Legal Road, probably the first thing to consider is whether there's visibility space. So you can see people on the footpath. And then the second, strangely, the resource consent application process doesn't control the area of the street from the property boundary to the curb and channel of the road. So there's a vehicle crossing, requirement, and you make a application. So that formation, would deal with visibility, has certain widths, but car parks in the street, if they're parked in the wrong place, can cause issues, from time to time. And that in part will be dealt with through the vehicle crossing approval process.
Does that process require the board to then approve yellow lines?
My understanding, and I don't, I'm not involved in the transport reports go up, but I understand if yellow lines are required, that is a community board approval. But that if they had to be installed, that would be part of that process.
Okay.
I'd just be really interested in getting more information around making sure that with the increased density of housing that we're seeing, that we do have a robust assessment around the safety impacts. So I appreciate we can't control car parking, but we do have some discretion over the entering and exiting and the queuing space, the turning circles. I would like just to understand what we might what we might, what discretion we may have around making sure that there is, particularly around that visibility. Especially you can have a lot of people go to the beach on the footpath.
Is it possible for me to just provide a follow-up?
Yeah,
on that issue?
I don't need
Because
it.
I probably hadn't looked through all the non-compliance,
Yeah,
with a fine-tooth comb.
But my assumption on Vocal Road is you have a lot of people walking up and down back from the beach, so it'd be quite a busy place for kids on, scooters or bikes or.
Okay, thanks, Danny. We'll have Greg, then Joe, and then we'll have we'll have Joe, and then we'll go on to the next part of the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. With regards to the consent, has it not gone through yet?
It was on further information. That information is now being provided, and I understand it's being assessed again.
Okay. With the community have always thought that was remain commercial, and there could be some shops on the bottom and residential on the top. We can't force them to do that.
But the resource consent application process can't force someone to use land for a particular purpose.
In the future, if someone wanted to gut out some of those bottom units and put commercial in, are they allowed?
From a district plan perspective, yes, they would be able to change it to commercial. And there would probably need to be a Building Act process that they look at, just to see how they can do that from a practical perspective.
Okay, so that remains commercial. And the other question I wanted to know is with the rates, does the commercial side pay more rates than the residential?
My understanding is that Airbnbs do generate a higher level of rate than residential units. I couldn't tell you what that figure is though.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, carry on with the presentation. So I come off. Carry on with the presentation.
Thanks, that's one.
Yeah, and I see we're having these two people and then we're moving on. Come back to it at the end of the week.
Good afternoon. I'm Tracy Weston. I'm the head of regulatory compliance, and the freedom camping monitoring sits within my unit. So with us today, we've got Tina, who's going to talk us through the bylaws component and just give you a bit of an information update around that sort of thing. And then Steve Tonley is my principal advisor, and he'll talk through any enforcement questions you may have.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Some of this might be familiar. This is touching on some of the briefing that we gave you in October in 2023, I think, when the law was changed. So we're just going to take you through a bit of a summary of the legislation, the changes that have happened, the council's bylaw, and then the rules in your board area. So legislation, we're talking about the Freedom Camping Act, made in 2011. It enabled freedom camping on all council land in New Zealand. So councils don't allow it, the law allows it, and we have some limited powers to regulate it. So that's a really important point. So anyone can freedom camp on any council land unless a bylaw or other law restricts it. And the Act was amended in 2023. It's quite recent. So it was amended with the Self-Contained Motor Vehicles Legislation Act that amended the Freedom Camping Act, and it made changes in 3 key areas. How people can camp on council land, the system for certifying freedom camping vehicles, and the types of penalties and infringement amounts changed. So I'm going to take you through those. Self-contained vehicles. So where previously it was council bylaws that had to specifically prohibit camping in vehicles that weren't self-contained, now the Act does it. So no one can freedom camp on council land in a vehicle that is not self-contained unless an individual council bylaw allows it, and we don't allow that in our district. So the idea here is that it's better for travellers because there's better consistency across the country and it's a lot clearer. The definition of freedom camping changed. So people who are experiencing homelessness are not freedom camping. The Act makes that really clear. So where people are living in a vehicle, a tent, a temporary structure, because they are, so quote, unable to live in appropriate residential accommodation, then they're not considered freedom camping. And the advice from Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment is that freedom camping infringements cannot be applied to people experiencing homelessness, and that council staff should refer people to social service agencies where appropriate. Self-containment, in terms of vehicles is largely about the plumbing and other facilities that are inside a vehicle. There's a new system of certification authorities and certifiers. So this is quite different to how it used to be. It is all managed by the Plumbers, Gas Fitters and Drain Layers Board, which is a statutory board under the Plumbers, Gas Fitters and Drain Layers Act, because it's ultimately about plumbing, not about vehicles. There was an immediate change when the law changed. So they altered the New Zealand standard, which is what self-containment used to, it's the New Zealand standard that you had to prove to get the self-containment warrant earlier, but that was a voluntary standard, and that form of self-regulation wasn't working well. So this is part of what led to the changes. So that immediate change was around the fixing of toilets. Then new regulations were developed. So Plumbers, Gas Fitters, Drain Layers, Self-Contained Vehicle Regulations came into force in 2023. This is a change from the blue warrant cards to the green warrant cards. So the old system of the voluntary standard was a blue warrant card. The new system is a green warrant card. Stickers are just for pretendies. They're not real. They don't mean anything. The warrant card is next to the registration, the vehicle, what's it called? And your front windscreen, yeah, that one is next to that. That's the warrant, and then this is the certificate that goes with it. So that's the important part for compliance and enforcement. And there was a 2-year transition process. That 2 years is nearly finished, but just recently MB consulted on extending the last component of that, which was the compliance requirements for privately owned vehicles to be certified to the new standard. So that has now been pushed out, despite objections from local government, to the 7th of June next year. And there is a new register of self-contained vehicles. So this was a problem previously with the voluntary standard, but also inconsistent certification and compliance across the country. And we couldn't really tell, there was no central way of checking if vehicles were certified to the right standard or not. That is now in place. And there is also a new offence for fake certification, because that was an issue that was occurring as well. This is a very busy slide. These are all of the offences. So these are just the infringement fines, so things that people can receive a ticket for. So before there was one fine, which was $200. Now the fines are, there's only one $200 one. Most of them are $400, or they get up to as high as $800. So the ones in colour there are the ones that relate to breaches of bylaws. The others are all breaches of the Act. And you can have a copy of this. But it's also on our website, and it's also, you can find it in the actual regulations as well. I can hold there if people are still reading, or I can skip through it if you like. Skip through it, cool. So we reviewed our bylaws. So bylaws need to be reviewed at least once every 10 years. So we reviewed it in 2021. So this is just coming out of COVID times. I think the border might have still been closed. It was a strange time in context anyway. We made some activity-based changes to what's allowable under the bylaws. So we put in a new rule to say that you cannot set up camping vehicles or equipment in a way that blocks thoroughfares. And that was particularly to deal with people opening their boot and cooking, setting up chairs and tables, putting out washing lines, that sort of thing. People can receive an infringement ticket for that. And we had previously put in a rule around a vehicle can only take up one marked parking space. If there are marked parking spaces, there aren't in all locations, but where they're marked, they shouldn't take up two, park across them, be too large a vehicle for the parking space. That's a safety issue. We made some location-based changes, particularly in your area. We created a new city coastal restricted zone, so that changed things because previously people had been able to camp in one location. So the rule that had applied was that you could camp and then you could stay up to 2 nights within a 30-day period, and you had to move at least 500 metres. That meant in the 6 kilometres of Marine Parade, you could move 500 metres, stay 2 nights, move 500 metres. So that's why we created the new zone for the coastal area, so that you could only stay 4 nights in total, and you had to move after at least 2 nights. So that's a specific thing that we created for issues that were occurring here. And we also added in the North Beach car park prohibited area. So that applies over weekend nights in the warmest months of the year, so between October and May. And we also added in the South Shore prohibited area. And just a note here that parks and reserves are regulated under a different bylaw. So the parks and reserves bylaw prohibits camping in land that is park or reserve, so this applies to other land, which does get a bit confusing, and we did raise this when the Act was being amended, but MB didn't pick up on any changes, and we're stuck with some complexity that's hard to work in practice. So this is the map. This is taken from our camping part of our website, and this reflects what is in the bylaw. So the city coastal restricted zone is there in yellow, Windsport Park down the south there, around the estuary, and then North Beach prohibited area, the north and south ramps, either side of the pier, which are also locked at night, and then the South Shore prohibited area. So when I said earlier that we have some limited powers to regulate freedom camping, this is what I'm meaning. So this is from the Act. So bylaws can only be made if a council is satisfied that the bylaw is necessary to protect the area, the health and safety of people who may visit the area, or access to the area. So those are the three grounds on which we can regulate, and the bylaw has to be the most appropriate and proportionate way of addressing the perceived problems. So this is the analysis that we need to provide if we're looking to regulate under the bylaw. And we have to, as with many of our bylaws, undertake an assessment as to whether there are any New Zealand Bill of Rights Act implications. So that's things like freedom of movement and freedom of association. So that's the limitations and scope that we've got to regulate. We maintained, we've had this in the bylaw for a while, this ability to temporarily close an area. And this is from clause 10 of the bylaw. So this is a power for the executive to close an area temporarily where the closure or restriction is necessary to prevent damage or allow maintenance or protect the safety of people or property, or provide for better public access, including in circumstances where events are planned for the area. We've only used this temporary closure twice. Once was for the North Beach car park while we were gearing up to undertake the review, and now it's a permanent area. And the other time is when the SailGP event was occurring in Naval Point in Littleton. So we prohibited freedom camping for a while so that the works that needed to go on to manage that event could go on. So the temporary closure, as well as complying with clause 10, must comply with the Act. So it still has to be a proportional response, and it still has to be necessary to protect those three key things. And a note too that bylaws can be challenged by judicial review, and this is particularly the case for freedom camping bylaws. There have been quite a few cases around the country where bylaws have been challenged, but in all cases by the New Zealand Motor Caravan Association. So where they are of the view that councils are overreaching or being overly prohibitive or regulating, restricting or prohibiting without good grounds, then they can be challenged by a judicial review. A little bit of a summary of our compliance monitoring enforcement activities. So we undertake weekend patrols from Labour weekend until November, and that's particularly for North Beach car park and North Beach area. Then we do daily patrols from December until April, generally most years. That's what we've done for the last few years. So in the evening, that's an education focused patrol. So that is talking to campers, checking that they know if they're doing the wrong thing or suggesting that they move on if they're in the wrong place. And then in the morning, that's when we're more likely to take enforcement action where people have been warned and they've clearly not listened and they're doing the wrong thing. And that's when we're likely to infringe people. And then at other times, we're responsive to complaints and concerns that are raised, rather than being actively patrolling every day. These are some preliminary findings just for the North Beach car park. So we don't have data for all days. So this is the days that we do have data. And you'll see there it's from mid-January, the whole of February and March so far. So this is up until yesterday. So on the evening patrols, the most vehicles we had in North Beach car park were 21 for January, 30 for February, and 24 for March.
How many parks are there?
I think I was trying to look at the online map and I thought 40 to 50. I couldn't quite tell the shadows on the photo. So on average, there were 8 vehicles in January, 15 in February, and 10 in March. And then in the morning, the numbers are a little bit lower. So an average of 15 vehicles, 18 vehicles, and 19 vehicles. Sorry, the highest number was 15, 18, and 19, and the average was 6, 7, and 5. So it's quite interesting to look at that in context. And of course, it depends on what time the patrols are happening. They don't happen at the same time every night because, of course, that would defeat the purpose. So they are staggered. They do them at different times. But that's what our data is showing. We've issued 2 infringement tickets in the North Beach car park this season, and we've had 35 freedom camping complaints in total for the coastal area. 4 of those have related to North Beach. And that's all that we had for you in terms of science.
We'll go to Kelly, then Joe.
Good stats. Good stats. My question is about enforcement. In terms, I just want to understand how that happens. Is the enforcement of a vehicle or an individual, their license, how does that kind of work,
Go talk through.
Yeah, so the enforcement is based on the vehicle itself, and then through that is the occupant. So obviously with the warrant, it will tell you how many people that the vehicle is warranted for, self-containment, so they will review that. But predominantly it's based on the vehicle that's there.
So if that person was to flip the vehicle off, a couple of months down the track, the new buyer would have to do their due diligence to see whether there's any fines.
Yes, that's correct. But unfortunately, we do come across instances where people have received an infringement and then they've sold their vehicle on, and the new person coming on is not aware of. We can't control that happening. But in those instances, we will not hold that new person accountable. Fortunately, we do waive those tickets because we don't know where the old person has gone. Usually it's from someone that's overseas.
Yeah, is there any way to attach a name to the, to the ticket so that it comes up in the system somewhere, maybe when they're trying to leave the country or something like that? Are they instant fines?
Yeah, they are handed on the spot by the patrol officers.
Yeah, do they have an option to pay on the spot?
No, they have to come in, or they can pay online, or they can come into a service centre and pay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a bit of a list because I've been dealing with the North Beach people about this for quite a wee while now. With the powers to make a change to the review by law, wasn't the Windsor Park done through that process?
That was part of the 2016 amendment to the bylaw. So we put the bylaw in place in 2015, which was quite new, and then we had a handful of areas that became really hugely problematic, and that was also at a time when we didn't have a requirement yet, and we did through that amendment for self-containment. So people were in tents. There were some places had hundreds of people. There was drug and alcohol situations. There were overflowing toilets. There was rubbish everywhere. It was not a good situation. So it was I think a Wainui and French Farm and Winsport Park and somewhere in Addington and possibly another one were all part of that 2016 amendment.
Okay, and a lot of these things, I don't understand how you've got 21 vehicles, an average of 8. What are the 21 referring to?
Sorry, the title, the highest number of freedom camping vehicles that were recorded.
Oh, that's the highest number. Okay. Does that doesn't include weekends?
Yes, it does.
It does.
Yeah,
so
because that's what we do monitoring.
So that's prohibited in the weekends, so there'll be no campers counted on the weekends.
Yes, so some of those,
just a 5-day average.
Some of those entries were 0. Yeah. Yeah, because there were no vehicles because it was the weekend because it's prohibited.
Did you divide it by 7 when you figured it out?
All the days weren't complete. We didn't have all the data, but for the days that we did have data, we did the average.
Okay.
There was also on one of those days that captured it was a prohibited day, and it's when the infringements were issued.
Okay. So with 30 vehicles averaged for that car park, there's probably only like 40 car parks, and 5 or 6 of them are accessible car parks as well, which can't be used by the public. And it's causing really bad issues with people trying to access the facilities, especially like the surf lifesavers and the pool users. And, you know, we're trying to work through to try and get more regulations put in place for this car park, because it's actually becoming a really big problem for ratepayers.
Would you say that the problems are occurring year round, or when do you think the worst problems
It
are
has
occurring?
increased, but I think one of the reasons it has increased was like after COVID, we're getting tourists back again, and they're really enjoying staying in the coastal area. But the other thing is that the council have promoted the coastal area as being a really good place to stay. And because it's been on all the advertising and on the website, we're getting more and more people there. And I think that's actually adding to the actual problem.
I think the information that went out over the summer was to let people know that if they were going to Freedom Camp, they should camp responsibly. And it is an area where people are able to Freedom Camp because that's what the law allows.
Yeah, there was a wee thing on Newsline from Nigel Cox actually saying, you know, if you want to stay, the coastal zone is very popular, and it had pictures that entice people there. And I think because of that is also the problem has actually it's blown out of control.
It's a hard balance to get right, I think, because we can't tell people they can't go there because they can go there. The messaging was to say, if you are going, here's what you need to know, and this is how you do so responsibly. It wasn't to encourage lots of people to come.
Yeah. So with the like you head down about the problems where you can actually enforce the change or the temporary ban, and out of all of those, that list, there's only one that doesn't apply. Is it that or the next one doing?
That's the temporary closure.
Yeah.
That's the
So we've got
temporary
people, especially like the hall users. There's several groups that use the community hall there, and some of them, there's the North Board Rider clubs that have competitions, and everyone turns up with their boards on top of their wetsuits. We've got the North Beach Surf Lifesaving Club, and over summer they had gear trailers wanting to get in and out, people with boards and skis, all of their patrol people, regular trainings, and they're having trouble trying to park in the area. And then there's the people that use the hall, which is the Karate Club, the Samoan Church, and the Friendship Club, which have been actually a tenant of the hall for about 30 years. And they're getting quite bored. And some of them are actually finding it hard to find a car park close by, and they're having mobility issues. So it's actually making it harder for them to get into there. And they're looking at maybe having to go to a different venue because it's just becoming too much of a nightmare to park there. So that access point is really is one of the biggest reasons that people are really concerned about the freedom camping there.
I understand that there's also some work going on to look at adjusting and altering and redesigning the parking area, which might also respond to them some of those concerns.
Yes, because we often get a big bang taking up two spaces, like one in front of the other, because they're so long. And then they try to manoeuvre out, and there's no space for them to manoeuvre out.
So that's the current breach of the bylaw. Yes. If their vehicle doesn't fit in the parking space, then that's a ticketable offence.
And then the other things happening, like the health and safety with the toilets and the bone rubbish and the food, people shaving in the toilets, people shaving in the drinking fountains or washing their knickers in the drinking fountains. And it's a real big concern.
Are these issues occurring in the last 6 months?
Yes, regularly.
Okay.
They occur all the time.
So I know they were occurring
And
before we put this in for the
setting up
weekend.
their tables and chairs and cupboards and tarpaulins. So
in the North Beach car park?
Yeah.
Tarpaulins?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All of these things in the petition.
Yep.
Okay, so there's a petition.
Not all of them.
Petition going into council next week. Okay, we've got Celeste, then Alex, then Tim.
Coming in, it's easy to ask a person than email. Just with the patrol, so if, say, you've got someone in a big motorhome and they're compliant, but they're actually taking up 2 parking spaces, how do we, lack of a better word, catch them breaking the rules, if there's only 2 patrols. Because if they're doing it during the day, they need to patrol.
So we have a component, we have 2 components to freedom camping monitoring. We have proactive, which is the education in the evening and the monitoring enforcement in the morning. We also have my team who are available 8 to 5 for reactive response to complaints. So when we get complaints, we will go out and do reactive response to those. But the proactive is the focus for the times between the 1st of December and the 30th of April.
I know that we've got steps in Solve and all those other ways of doing things. I think one bit of feedback that I get is that it's because you have, it's a high type of thing that people are doing. So you might give somebody that education, then they move on, and then you've got the next person. So someone living on that stretch of road might be tearing their hair out or trying to access the club. So is there a way that we can make that process a bit simpler? Because it really puts the burden on residents to having to report the 100th caravan that's blocking the path, rather than going, hey, this is something that, you know, is predictable activity. So how do we kind of get ahead of it? You know, I know there's no simple answers there, but like, is there a way to make it simpler?
I think we need to be careful not to confuse parking issues with freedom camping issues, and we need to be careful not to confuse vehicles that can be used for freedom camping at times that aren't freedom camping. So freedom camping is staying in a vehicle overnight. A vehicle that can be used for freedom camping during the day is not freedom camping. So anyone can park any vehicle anywhere during the day, whether it's used for freedom camping or not. Everyone's got the same rights, obligations and responsibilities. So you still have to comply with parking laws and traffic laws. So you can't park over a driveway, you can't park over yellow lines. Those rules apply to every vehicle. But in terms of actual freedom camping is sleeping overnight in a vehicle.
So what you're saying is that in that case, that's a parking breach.
It's a parking breach. It's not freedom camping. But staying overnight in, say, North Beach car park in a vehicle that's too big for a car parking space, that is an infringement offence, and that's not a warn, wait to see if they leave. That's a you shouldn't be here, you're taking up too much space.
So I understand that, so I can explain it to someone. If someone was in a camper van, this is an example that someone gave to me, the camper van's blocking is actually extending into the road because it's too long, and they reported it to the council, and the council said they've got no rules to manage this. They said it wasn't a parking breach, even though it was actually onto the road, so it was quite dangerous. If it's happening during the day,
that is a parking compliance issue.
And what time of night would it become a free? Is it in the morning?
Well, no, it's sort of, there's no set time when it becomes an issue, but generally the messaging there was that the nighttime patrolling tends to be saying to people, hey, did you know you're not allowed to stay here, or hey, you shouldn't be here because your vehicle doesn't fit. And then if they're still there in the morning, then that's when they get an infringement.
And from the statistics that we showed earlier, you will see that there was a noticeable decrease in the morning patrols than what there were in the evening. So our educational component is working. People have been advised that they can't stay here, or they've been here too long, they need to move on, and they are responding to that. So that's really positive that's happening in this area.
So I've got a couple more, is that okay? Yeah. What's the temporary bylaw, the temporary ban, freedom camping? And it sounds like in the past we've had the ability to put that in place, because I'm not quite clear, because I got some advice saying anticipation of the potential bylaw is not applicable grounds in the bylaws to put a temporary ban, but then earlier.
No, the previous situation with North Beach was that there was issues that were identified and concerns from the community, and we couldn't act immediately because any bylaw process is slow, but also because we were doing a full review of the bylaw, like within 6 months or a year or something at that time. And so we put a temporary ban in, which I think was also for weekends, over that time until we got the full bylaw review completed. And then we, as part of that process, we assessed it. We recommended putting in the permanent ban for those, May and October until May. And then consulted the community on that, and then that was put in as a permanent ban.
Do you mean anticipation of the bylaw would be grounds, or?
The bylaw isn't due to be reviewed again until 2031, so it's on a 10-year review cycle. So I'm just, the particular circumstances last time were an increase in issues, an inability to respond quickly, but knowing that we were doing the work. So it made more sense to put the temporary ban in until we could get the work done, and then we put it in as a permanent ban.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, if council is considering an amendment to the bylaw, and there was some of those other criteria that were met to fulfill the legislation.
It was also seasonal, so we're about to head into not summer, so it's likely that numbers will drop off of freedom camping anyway. So sometimes seasonally problems take care of themselves and issues reduce.
It's more of a legal thing in terms of like we would, because obviously if it's seasonal, we can predict that we have summers, you know,
so the thing that we're looking for is evidence of problems that align with the Act so that we can regulate, because we have to stick within our legal powers and we have to make a case that it's justifiable. Otherwise, we're open to challenge and we're not undertaking good regulatory practice.
Yeah, I think because we're getting the advice through the notice of motion, I'm just trying to see what past precedent was and if that would apply now or not, where the differences are. And I know that information will come through as part of that process.
Last time we put it in for weekends.
Yeah.
While we were reviewing it, then we proposed it as a permanent change, consulted on it, put it in as a permanent change. So it's now in there as a permanent weekend, because the issues that we were seeing were to do with events and activities happening at the Surf Life Saving Club and the community hall, which are busy at weekends over those warm summer months. They're not happening in the depths of winter. There isn't as much, there weren't as many access issues at all happening during the week. It was to do with the community coming together, the coffee cart, people swimming, going to the beach, visitors, locals, everything. So that's why we put it in as a weekend ban. And
So
that's
there was evidence that the issue extended beyond the weekend, because I assume travellers just come Monday to Sunday. And the facilities that are being utilised in that space, like community facilities, that might be used outside of the weekends. So for instance, the New Brighton Friendship Society, if you're 80 people, over 80, can't get to the building because there's people there from October to February, say, that would potentially be grounds to look at it if we were also looking at an amendment. That's my understanding, is because we're looking at a like for like, identifying a problem, which is weekends. But
the weekends are already in there at the moment.
But extending it. So if we looked at the peak, which is the summer, and we had a similar situation happening over the weekends during the week, then it is a like for like. That's what I would understand, but
it's really based on evidence, and that comes from a variety of different sources. So the compliance evidence, what the monitoring is showing, what park staff are finding in terms of damage, rubbish left behind, frequency of bin emptying, that sort of thing. It's the whole mix of issues, and at the moment we're not seeing a big problem in that area.
Where do we get more information about the reporting on that? Because we sort of get quite high level information, but we've requested more granular information around.
That's what this is. The numbers that we've found every night doing monitoring are showing that the numbers are relatively low.
But even so, we've only gotten this now. But if we wanted more regular updates on this information, because I think sometimes there's a mismatch between what's reported and what we see in the community, and this happens not just in freedom camping, but outside of freedom camping. So we've got lots of issues, whether it's enforcement of the alcohol bylaw, where we know that there's problems, that people aren't reporting for whatever reason. So we just have to make sure that the information that's being reported is also reflective of the other bits, the other type of information which is important, which is community feedback, which might come directly to local reps rather than straight to council.
Okay, so the best advice I can give is advise your constituents to complain to council, because then it is a single port of contact. We have their details and their information, and we can follow it up. If we're getting it second or third hand, it's a lot harder for us to respond in real time. So especially with freedom camping, we need to be able to respond in real time. And we need to be able to, basically we have to be Johnnies on the spot when we're enforcing freedom. We can't do it retrospectively. So, and in relation to reporting, what frequency would you be seeking? Because the challenge we have within my team is an incredibly manual process. It takes very, very time consuming, and we don't have dedicated staff to do that. So we'll be putting them on other activities to perform that reporting.
If there's logs or things, I'd be interested to know what's currently available without adding to the existing workload.
We wouldn't be able to provide you with the direct logs that we receive from Allied, because that would be a breach of some privacy. We're actually getting identification factors from the people that are there, names, date of birth, vehicle registration numbers. And I wouldn't want to be putting that out in the public arena.
Maybe
Okay,
it's something that we can just get some more clarity on outside of this forum, just so I understand how that works, because I think we get updates about every 3 to 6 months through council, but it's just stats, and I don't think it gives us enough information to kind of understand if and where there is a problem, and maybe some of the areas that we could make some improvements.
Happy to see that, but if you can just be really specific
Yeah,
as to
sure.
what you're seeking, that would be really
Thank you.
helpful.
okay, thanks. Next we've got Alex, Greg and Kelly, and we need to move along, so just.
Yeah, I promise mine are a lot quicker. Cool, sweet. Look, you said, actually on that slide, 2 infringements. Do you have the information on where they were? Like, were they in the North Beach?
They were
park
both
or
weekend breaches.
Yeah, they were both.
in the North Beach car park?
Yeah, we specifically did a search on that car park.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, these stats are just North Beach car park, they're not the whole coastal
Oh,
area.
yeah, I see, yeah.
That's North Beach.
So then why does it specify that 4 relating to North Beach when?
Because we were also just highlighting the magnitude of complaints that we received for the coastal area is 35.
Yeah, cool.
For the
So,
whole area, and 4 of them were North Beach.
so the infringements, is that for the whole area?
Infringements is just North Beach.
Just North Beach, okay, I guess, yeah, it's part of that information we need some, might be good to know infringements everywhere in the ward as well, but I'll leave that
So
now.
just touching on that, recently, up until the 15th of March,
Yeah.
we had issued 10 infringements for the entire freedom camping season for the coastal area.
Wonderful, that's very helpful, thank you. Temporary closure,
Done?
no, we've got another question.
It's your last question.
Right, she got
Yeah, I know, but we're running out of time, Alex.
Well, you talked about temporary closure. What does case law say? How long is it explicitly stated how long a temporary closure is? Could it be a seasonal closure?
No, there's nothing that says what that is, but we would be open to challenge or risk if we put in something temporary for several years, for example. So last time it was in place while we were doing the review work, and that was fine. I can't remember exactly, maybe 8 months or 9 months. I think we put in for 6 months and then we had to extend it because the review just naturally takes a fair amount of time. So we've got to assess the whole district and all the activities that are occurring. But that was, yeah, a different situation.
And then last one's a yes or no, so very quick, I promise. 2 car parks, if you park over 2 car parks, is that a breach of the normal parking bylaw?
I don't think it is, and it might be on a road, so there's different rules that apply to the road corridor to a car park that's marked up. So if those haven't been resolved with any parking limits, then I think it's not a breach of the traffic and parking bylaw.
Okay.
But if you're, crossing a vehicle entrance, doing something else then on the road, then it is.
So they could get some information on that, please, just so we know what we can tell residents is a
You
breach
can
of
log a
that.
ticket or flick an email to me.
Yeah,
No actions from information session.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on. We've got Tim, Greg and Kelly, and let's move it on.
I'll be even more
Time
brief.
to cover.
I think you answered the question. This was solely the North Beach car park, not the other 2.
That's right.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you, Greg.
So one of the best ways to make a change to the bylaw is to get a lot more complaints rather than people just complaining to us, but actually complaining to you guys.
Yes.
Very straightforward, isn't it?
But having, sorry, for some context, a large number of complaints, for example, because people don't like seeing camping vehicles during the day, is not going to lead to anything. So it has to be a complaint that relates to actual problems that relate to the things we can regulate under the Freedom Camping Act.
Just in relation to why we do an education component and why we do a monitoring in the morning, is the morning factor is obvious that they've been sleeping overnight. In the evening when we get there, if we get there at 8 p.m, they could be patrons going to the beach, but they just happen to be in a camper van. So that is not classified as freedom camping. So that is why we could do the evening education and the morning monitoring.
And people can challenge their infringements as well with any ticketing across any of the.
Kelly made a comment before about a camera. Rather than having to go to the site to follow up on things, is there the ability to talk to either the surf club or someone else who already has an internet connection they might be willing to offer to set up a camera that's live stream?
I think there are legal issues with issuing an infringement based on.
It's not necessarily issuing an infringement, but being able to see that there is, rather than going out there and saying, oh, that person's actually role.
You mean to remotely look at it in the response to a reactive?
Yeah, so
link?
rather than having a senior staff member out, if you get something come through, you can look at it and go, actually, that person is in the role. Rather than send someone out there and realise they weren't actually in the role.
There is an issue with that came up when we went to that site visit down at the park with them putting a camera in, and apparently when you're observing the public, it must go through the police or something, so it's not as straightforward as us putting a camera in. Can you remember what they said?
No, I think that was different because it wasn't necessarily through the council's infrastructure, so it might not necessarily be police, it might be, because I mean, we've got council cameras in the CBD and in spaces like that. I think it's the infrastructure being used by council rather than an individual group or entity. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, but there was something more to it than that. Okay, Kelly. So it's the last question.
Well, Greg does still.
No, I gave him a little.
Yeah, my question is really just around how useful some form of private camera would be if somebody had a security camera on their house opposite. Would be useful to you guys in terms of?
No, there's legal issues around any use of cameras for enforcement.
I'm not really talking in terms of prosecution. I'm talking in terms of giving a good picture of what is actually happening and whether you could corroborate the figures that you were getting with your with your monitoring on the site, because that's good data, but would it help to corroborate it if somebody did have a private weekend on the?
As I mentioned earlier, what that would be showing me is somebody parking somewhere. It wouldn't show me somebody freedom camping.
Yeah, good point.
So it would be, yes, there's a car, it's in a car park, it's sitting there at 7 p.m. There's no breaches of anything happening at that time.
Yeah, but I'm just saying if it was shown at 8 p.m, 9 p.m, 11.
Yeah, there's no cut-off time.
There might not be anyone in it. We also run into the issue that we get homeless people that are parking as well.
Yeah.
But when people make a complaint, they can offer whatever photo or footage they may have.
Oh, so they can take.
Yeah. The customer services will ask if there's any attachments they want to make to the complaint.
Would that be more useful for you guys? I mean, to have a few photos or?
Well, sometimes a picture paints 1,000 words, and it does help us prioritise where we go at what time.
You're right. Thank you.
Okay.
Just in relation to that point.
Okay, quickly.
Yeah, there have been quite a few people sending reports through of other things happening in the car park, like the food wastage, where they wash their dishes and everything, but does that come through to you or not?
No, it's not an enforcement issue, it's an operational issue around cleaning and maintenance and things, so it would go.
But that is kind of like a freedom camping issue as well.
It can also be members of the public. It's very easy to blame all of the things that happen on freedom campers, but all of these public spaces and the infrastructure is available to other visitors and to locals as well as freedom campers.
There could be people picnicking and washing their dishes before they go home. It could be homeless people. There's a whole lot of what ifs.
So we've got to be careful about
I apologise. It is picture paste. Not Tim is just correctly.
Thank you, Tim.
Excellent. Thank you very much for coming in and explaining that to us. If everyone would like to stand. Hang on. Yeah, I see we're closing questions down. Did you want one?
Paul, we could use it. Just one very quick question.
Okay, well, you can talk
And
to
I'm happy to
him.
get them and go back.
All right, we'll say goodbye and then we'll ask for questions. Thanks. Here, tau, rangi, o te rangi, e te kone, o tō, tau, afi, tātou, ki,